Hello everybody and welcome back to the TripleJump Podcast. It's an E3 special video game podcast. What's up? I'm Dick Mychinko.
This just in, I'm Brian Bumpus.
Hi Brian, how's it going?
I'm just going pretty good, Dick. How you doing?
Yeah, good to be back.
Yeah?
It's been a couple of years, but here we are.
Fancy Ben and Peter leaving in the wake of E3 of all time. It's a video game channel here, and they've just marched off.
Absolute colossal willies, those
Good job
two.
we're here. God, the whole place would fall apart. Jeez.
So in case you missed the predictions contest that Ben and Peter were having over the course of E3, it did end in a tie, which meant that those two have been exiled, and it is the turn of us, Dick Mychinko and Brian Bumpus, to rule the roost for the next calendar month. An entire month of Mychinko and Bumpus.
Yeah.
The Dream
Team. There they are, yeah.
So we will be present on all streams, on podcasts, on Worst Games Ever. Basically, all content except for lists, which are pre-recorded way in advance. So that's the excuse there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed E3, though. What a flipping week. We are still not done at the time of recording. And even at the time of release, in terms of covering it, we've got one more list to go out next week about the biggest announcements of this E3. But Ben and Peter have been streaming live reactions and making all sorts of content on the channel. And we, by extension of them, would like to thank you for tuning in and watching all of it, if you did.
Very grateful for that. Thank you all.
Yeah.
It's time, though, to get to business. If you feel you're capable of stepping into Ben's big shoes.
No, that guy's a clown. I already did it before.
Yeah.
I'm a vet at this point. I'm literally a vet. Dick Mychinko served in some armed conflicts. That's me. Yes, it is time. No war crimes. No. Can't talk about war crimes. Now it's time to talk about the ad for this episode of the podcast, which, of course, we have an ad every single week. It's how we keep the lights on here. This week, we are sponsored by Elden Fling, which is a dating service for over 70s.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Fancy a fling? Are you an Elden? Sign up.
Yes and yes. It is pure filth, that website. Not safe for work. Don't go on it.
Oh,
it's practically pornography, so just stay away, unless you're into that. But, of course, don't do it at work, because that's unprofessional.
In which case, that's fine.
Yeah, if you want to be unprofessional, you go for it. Yes, we are sponsored by Elden Fling. You going to sign up?
How old or young do you have to be?
Well, over 70, but
okay,
Brian,
70.
You're getting up there in age, aren't you?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I'm interested. I'm old, free, and single. So I'm going to be there.
Sexy and free.
Mm-hmm. Look out for me.
In fact, Elden Fling sounds like one of your relatives' business ventures.
Do you think? Oh, you mean just the nature of the business? Yeah.
Just the nature of the business. Yeah.
Yeah. Just sign up if you're an old person looking for love. It does,
love.
Yeah.
And then it goes hilariously wrong. However, you may have more luck with that service because this one isn't real. It's not real, though.
What?
No, it's not real, though.
How am I going to find love?
You're just not. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I'm just not going to find love ever.
You just won't find love. But where you will find love, not in the love sense.
In a hopeless place.
We'll be over at patreon.com/Team TripleJump, where our wonderful patrons, they're the true sponsors of this podcast. You can support us for $1 per month and get access to the podcast post that goes out weekly, where you can submit questions. We only answer questions from patrons. So do consider going over there, patreon.com/Team TripleJump. We have other tiers available too. But Peter, no. But Brian.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to take a minute. But Brian, this is the first thing we're recording, I think, with having taken over the channel.
Having just arrived, yeah.
Where are we walking today in the video version of this podcast?
How about across the temporary graves of Ben and Peter? They're not actually dead, but it's their jobs for 1 month are dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Okay, yeah. That's where we're walking.
When you say where are we walking, The PNG is that going to still be of Ben and Peter, or is it going to be of us? Is the question.
I think we have the technology to make it of us.
Yeah.
I think we can do that. Yeah, that can happen. That's not a problem. I hope.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay, before we get to the first question, it's time to hear a little bit about TripleJump.gg.
Oh, lovely.
Hello everyone! As well as our extremely real and totally not fictitious in any way sponsor, we're officially partnered with PlayStation, Xbox and Nintendo to sell their codes through our own website, TripleJump.gg.
Here you can get everything from topping up your digital wallets to PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live Gold, Xbox Game Pass and Nintendo Switch Online subscriptions, as well as Minecraft Mine Coins. Mine Coins, they'll be your coins any minute.
Nice one, Peter.
Oh, thanks very much.
It's 100% legitimate, directly supports us, and provides you with the delightful digital currencies you're going to buy anyway. Visit TripleJump.gg to browse our full stock.
TripleJump.gg. This is a real sponsor. Wow, do you think that that joke about Minecoin is going to get old after every single week for the next God knows how long? Do you think that's...
No. I think it will be funny in perpetuity, and I think it will really, 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 really upset at least two people, one of whom will just stop listening, and the other person will go on a complete crazed rant on Twitter at us and just tell us how stupid Ben and Peter are.
It's not a good look.
No. What? Us mocking Minecoins or people defending Minecoins?
Well, both. I meant us mocking Minecoins, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's from... Our mocking is from a place of ignorance and fear. We don't understand Minecoins. It's upsetting to us because we can't sort of wrap our little peanut brains around.
Also, that was recorded before we arrived. That's Ben and Peter on
That's
that
not
recording,
us.
So.
That's not us. If it continues to go out once Ben and Peter return, that's well and truly on them.
Send all your hate to them.
Hate those guys.
Yeah.
They're the source of all my problems.
Well, talking of guys that I hate... Here's Sputnik. No, I'm joking.
Oh, my goodness.
No, this is the beloved patron Sputnik, who we love very much, who has submitted a question here. E3 is now done. Was it a 7 out of 10? That was our sort of average score we gave it as a prediction. Or, well, we didn't. Ben and Peter did. Oh, it's kind of really...
Yeah, flipping heck, yeah.
Well, it's a teething problems.
When you say we, you mean the podcast in general?
Yeah, I guess
the Royal We, right?
Yeah, the Royal We gave it around a 7 out of 10 ahead of time as a prediction. I don't know about you, Dick, but I was a bit underwhelmed on balance by what went down at E3 this year. I wasn't disappointed in the sense that I don't think it was a bad E3, but it really wasn't like a great one. It wasn't thoroughly exciting. There were like a few games that actively piqued my interest, and one of the things that got me most excited was, relatively speaking, a tiny detail that most people haven't even heard about, which is just the Orcs Must Die 3 is finally coming to Steam. That was announced at E3.
Yeah, that's the biggest news of the week.
Yeah, for me, I'm really excited about that one. But
it's happening.
Yeah, in terms of the more mainstream presences, it was fine. There was enough there that I thought, okay, I'm glad I sat and watched this thing, but well, I imagine you feel the same way, right? I don't know.
Yeah, ask me again if it's a 7 out of 10.
Was it a 7 out of 10?
No, it wasn't. It flipping wasn't. It was fine. It was a fine show. I think there were plenty of games announced and shown off that lots of people will be very excited for. Everyone's told to their own proclivities. But for me personally, there was very little there. The show felt really stretched. Like, it felt like a lot of publishers and developers, and with sort of God, I'm so tired. With some exceptions, it felt like a lot of these conferences didn't need to be there. I'm now going to quote a line I really enjoy that Luke Plunkett wrote in an article about how he thought E3 just wasn't worth it this year, and he was consuming it for the first time since 2006 as a consumer rather than covering it for Kotaku. And he was just saying how exhausting it was and how how it was just not worth his time. Like, it wasn't worth keeping up with everything. He said, "Can you believe that in a year where almost nothing big and new was announced, the week of E3 consisted of 17 separate shows." 17 shows! Get absolutely flipped, but not flipped, is what the article says. I think I saw his
headline when I was looking for weird news. It was just like, yeah, it's okay. We could have skipped E3 this year or something like that.
It's always quite inflammatory, his approach, but I do appreciate it. But that will ruffle feathers, and it does. If you follow him on Twitter, he often tweets like people who've responded like, you flipping idiot. There's so much. Halo Infinite, you know? And of course, that's nothing against Halo Infinite. That's nothing against any of the games that were shown this year. But if we're talking about E3 as an event, it wasn't necessary, was it? It was exciting leading into it, as it is every year, to have all this stuff in one place. But coming out the other side of it, I don't feel any richer for it. I feel like a lot of this stuff could have had dedicated showcases at any time throughout the year.
Well,
any time.
I wonder if that's part of the problem, though, is that because there are now a few sort of sporadic showcases throughout the year, you know, for example, your Nintendo Directs, and Ubisoft Forwards happen every so often, things like that. Does it mean that there's now less news to go around in terms of when E3 rolls around? They've already blown a few loads, if you'll pardon the lack of a better phrase.
A real
there.
Brianism there.
Well, I'm feeling sleepy, so my brain is really struggling to. All I can think about is that
blowing loads.
Yeah, but you know they have spent some of their big reveals earlier on in the past couple of years, really, because it's been a while since the last E3. So maybe there's a bit less to kind of go around by the time E3 arrives. I don't know if that's part of the issue. I guess also personally for us, it doesn't help that Sony no longer have a presence there. You know, I imagine big Nintendo boys and girls were quite pleased by the Nintendo Direct, and Xbox fans may well have got more out of the Xbox show than we did. So perhaps if Sony had been there with a few bits of PlayStation news, that might have improved E3 for us. But even then, like, taking that completely out of the equation, just looking at the other shows that I ought to have been excited by, because I usually am, or there's something for me there, like Ubisoft, Bethesda, you know, even to an extent, Xbox and Nintendo. I like watching those all the same. I just wasn't really that impressed overall. And as I'm sure we'll get to, things like Starfield, for example, that's like a game that's been anticipated for a long time, and this was supposed to be the big reveal. And then even at this stage, after that game being in development for such a long time, it was actually just a CG trailer. And, you know, I am sort of looking forward to Starfield in the sense that I want to check it out when it's finally available either in trailer form or it's actually been released. But like that, for example, didn't do anything for me at all. I was like, okay, we know it exists and is still happening. Great. But it didn't get me going in any way. So yeah, there are a few issues I think kind of behind the sort of apathy.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to dive too deeply into it because we've got a very specific question about what's going on with E3, etc. in a minute. But on a base level, was E3 a 7 out of 10? For me, no, it wasn't. And I think that's nothing to do with the games shown. Honestly, even if you take platform preference out of the equation. Even if PlayStation were there and they're like, here's every franchise we've ever made getting a sequel. There we go. That'll shut you all up, won't it? You can all be quiet now. I still don't think it would have made the event any better. It's difficult to separate the event from the showcases. The showcases are, you know, they're tied directly to the event itself. There wouldn't be an event without the showcases. But I still just think that I think I saw someone said that it was like butter that was spread too thinly. That's genuinely what it felt like. You know, we had a guy there for Overwatch 2 showing us skins. It's like, what is this? This does not. You do not need to dedicate time. It felt like a lot of scrambling. A lot of these conferences either didn't need to happen or could have been a lot shorter. And it's really nice to see smaller games getting the spotlight. But you know that they're only getting it because there aren't enough big games to be shown off. And if that's the case, then maybe just don't be here. Maybe just do something more bespoke later on.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to sound like we're being real negative Nellies. You know, I'm worried that people will just think, oh, these stupid idiots, they just hate E3. It's like, we really don't.
No.
Like, I love E3. I was so excited for E3, but coming out the other side, no, I don't necessarily think that it was worthwhile this year.
Yeah. Again, as you say, we'll get into it a bit more with another question coming up. But I agree about it being spread thin. You know, it would almost be nicer if there was just an E3 show on. I mean, I do quite like having it over a few days because you've got more to look forward to. But imagine if there was just a single E3 conference that happened every year, and everyone put their biggest projects in it, and it was just like 2 hours of the cream of the crop from every one of those 17 conferences or however many there were. That would be, something. I mean, that's probably too far over to the other extreme, but there's a balance to be had there rather than lots of little shows. It would be nicer to have just a few more focused events with big announcements in all of them. But
Brian, I think we're going to have to break with tradition here, which is fine because Ben and Peter aren't here. I think we're just going to pull question 2 forward and get to what we play in afterwards.
Sure, because we're kind of on it already, aren't we?
We're doing it. We're talking about it.
Yeah, why not?
Harrison and Michael Milan asked something very similar. With this year's E3 being pre-recorded, do you think that's the future of gaming conferences, or will the format return to how it was? I thought it felt less genuine and human, but overall the conferences were tighter and polished. So continuing from what you were saying and now using that question as an excuse to talk a bit more deeply about E3 and where it's going to go, that all the publishers bringing their A game, that's increasingly what Jeff Keighley's trying to do, not only with the Game Awards, but Summer Game Fest. He famously walked away from E3 a couple of years ago, and at exactly the same time a few other people did, just sort of saying, E3 is not changing with the times. It's not what we need anymore. We don't need to be there. I think tactically, Jeff is very clever to position Summer Game Fest as sort of an unofficial E3 kickoff because he's not partnered with E3 at all. Yeah. In fact, he has some quite public beef with E3 in that he was excluded quite publicly from being one of the. I think he was one of the the official streaming partners. They were just not, and then E3 had to come out and say, no, there was no conscious decision here, to which he, quote, tweeted with sort of like the side-eye emoji. And it was like, okay, right. It seems that they don't really get on anymore, and that's fine. But I applaud Jeff for what he's doing. Like, I really admire him. And his goal of like getting all the big players together to show off some of their coolest stuff. Obviously, they don't go all out because sometimes they want to reserve it for their own announcements and stuff. Yeah. But that idea of getting everyone together, even if it was just, even going back like 4 or 5 years to E3s of old, where it's like, okay, Xbox and Microsoft, you're up at, say, 11 a.m., Sony, you're up at 1 p.m., Nintendo, you're up at 3 p.m. Get it all done in one day. Just get all the big ones out of the way in one day. But yeah, E3 itself this year, there were so many nothing conferences, so many that you just didn't need to pay attention to. And we keep referencing it. We made a fantastic video. James Jenkins wrote it, and he did a brilliant job talking about what the future of E3 could be, whether it was direct streams or whether it was these live conferences. But what we got this year was an E3 that was direct streams, but it just happened to be in the layout of E3. And Harrison's right. It did feel a bit insincere. We didn't get crowd reactions, which I'm torn on because crowd reactions are sometimes the worst part of E3. But it felt, and I know there's a pandemic, there's so many factors to this that make it really hard to decisively say one way or the other. But for me personally, I am torn because I love E3 and I've always loved E3, but as it's moved more and more in the direction of a consumer show rather than a trade show, it's gotten more entertaining because it used to be far more about facts and figures. Yeah. But at the same time, I feel like it's lost a lot of its impact because it's created this culture, not only in game development, which encourages crunch because developers need to get something out in time for E3, but also publishers need to have something to show for E3. So often we see games way before they're ready, or we see skins for a new game, or we get two blokes on stage saying, "Hi, we've partnered with PlayStation to set up a new studio. We've got nothing to tell you." There is so much that is nice to hear, but doing it purely for the fact that you need to have something at E3 it shouldn't be the reason why. It should be shown when it's ready. There are a few exceptions, Peter. I know I'm just waffling on. No, not Peter.
No.
Flip, Brian.
Right.
I know I'm waffling on.
No, go on. It's fine.
But there are a few exceptions, like Guardians of the Galaxy. Regardless of how excited you are for that game, it was announced this year. They showed a load of gameplay, they showed a trailer, and it's coming before the end of the year. That's how you do game announcements. That's what E3 should be for. But people are so desperate to get this spotlight that things are shown way before they're ready, and it doesn't feel right. And I really don't know, honestly, what the future of E3 is. But I'm not convinced that this year was remotely necessary. We could have had another summer of like conferences dotted around the place, and that was frustrating last year because they snuck up on us and we weren't expecting it. But having everyone fall over each other to desperately show something off at E3, I don't think it paid off this year.
Yeah, and you're right that it's because of the pandemic, it's actually difficult to extrapolate exactly what direction E3 is really going, because you have to think back to before COVID was an issue. There were already conversations going on about how, is E3 starting to die? Are people going to move towards pre-recorded showcases now and do less stage presence stuff? That predates COVID. But of course, since coronavirus came along, there's also been a necessity to do pre-recorded stuff. And so it's quite difficult to predict exactly where things are going to go once restrictions are lifted globally. I certainly think that E3 will return in a physical sense. There will be, of course, a real show, quote unquote. But whether the big publishers and developers decide that they are then going to return to stage-based presentations, that's a difficult one, because it's a bit like how lots of people pre-COVID were thinking, wouldn't it be nice to work from home? That'd be nice. I could probably do my job from home. I bet I could. But my boss will never go for it. Then their hands were forced. Everyone had to work from home. And, it's been said for the past 12 to 18 months now that, there's going to be a massive increase in people who are now going to be working remotely post-COVID, where it's no longer a necessity. It's that kind of thing where I think now that some of these publishers and developers have had a taste for what they can achieve with pre-recorded stuff, and maybe even pre-recorded stuff not played at E3 but at another time in the year, perhaps they've now realised, that went quite well. We could just do that next time if you like. So, coronavirus has had a whole different effect on E3 to kind of add to the issues it was potentially already having in around sort of 2018. So it's difficult to know where things are going to go. But I agree with Harrison that it felt a little bit, I don't want to say soulless, but it had less soul. It had less charm to it. And I love having the crowd reactions. You're right, Dick, that it is a source sometimes of cringe. It's a source of just crowds being dicks, like just not actually. If you're pardon, I don't mean to use your name in such a derogatory sense.
Take my name in vain like that.
Sometimes it's safer to have a pre-recorded video that everyone could just watch from the safety of their own home, rather than a live thing with a live audience and tech issues and all those sorts of things. But in some ways, that's the thing I'll probably miss the most if E3 turns into just a series of pre-recorded presentations. I really like just the sort of the weird things that happen. I like Just Dance, Ubisoft's Dance. I like just people coming out in t-shirt blazer combos and trying to be cool and doing memes. And it'll be a shame to lose all that if things do indeed just move towards this trend of being pre-recorded videos. Because with that, all you get all that carries over is the crappy response from the audience, but just in the YouTube chat, which is an absolute pit of despair. YouTube chat isn't great at the best of times, but the E3 YouTube live chats were absolutely horrendous.
Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to conclude and just say, I'll miss proper live shows if this is the trend and we just eventually move towards all pre-recorded. It'll be a real shame.
I will too. Honestly, I certainly will, and that's why I'm so torn. If all these conferences become pre-recorded, then the only thing that's unifying them under an E3 banner is just their placement over the course of a week in the year. Like there's no reason these need to be at E3. And as I said, if developers and publishers are busting their asses to make sure that they've got something to show just because it's E3, then do you really need to be there? Do you really need to be there? I don't know that you do. Sony hasn't been there for 2 years now. It wasn't out last year, obviously. Yeah. Well, last year didn't exist, E3 wise, but they dropped Horizon Zero Dawn, not Forbidden West stuff, like a couple of weeks ago, and like their engagement went off the charts. They know they don't need to be at E3, and I know a lot of smaller games and publishers and developers get eyes on them just by virtue of being at E3. But equally, there's so much there vying for attention, you could very easily be drowned out. So there's so many pros and cons. But yeah, if it's not a stage show, it's instantly not as interesting. And man, I just don't know. Like, I really don't know. The games, it's difficult not to come across as negative, and I'm sure people are very cross because their favorite game was announced this year or got a release date.
Yeah,
and I'm sure it's also very easy to just label us as people did in our live reactions as well as Sony ponies, which is a fun way of just completely deflecting from genuine criticism. But okay, but yeah, like the games are brilliant. Some of the games shown this year looked fantastic. Hugely excited, not only for those games but for the people who are looking forward to those games. But when you talk about E3 as a show, is it necessary? I'm not convinced it is. I'm certainly not convinced it was this year. I just hope that it improves next year. If they do it next year, like I want it to be better. I want it to be how I remember it being, this just weird circus of gaming pageantry. Like this wasn't that. And I'm sad that it's like, I don't want it to fail. I do think that this year was unnecessary, and I do think that while we're still coming out of this pandemic, it could have just been a collection of events. I do think Jeff Keighley's vision for announcing games is perhaps the best way of doing it if we were to adopt that model wholly as a pre-recorded thing, even though he was live to an extent, obviously. But yeah, I want old E3 back, and this was not old E3. And if they're going to continue down this path, I'm not convinced that it will stay viable. A lot of studios and developers and publishers learned last year that they did not need E3 to do their own live streams, and they started experimenting again. And perhaps this year will be the wake-up call that actually, why did we, for Gearbox, for example, why did we do E3? Just by virtue of having a presence there? No, we should have waited until September when we could have shown off gameplay for Wonderlands. There was no need to be there. Why did we do that? We will see what the future holds. I sincerely hope it's a bright one, but this year, not convinced, personally. And that's nothing to do with the games. Again, that's nothing to do with the games shown.
No, I'll just say again as well that Summer Game Fest is definitely, that's a step towards the right direction. Because the good thing about that is as well, you never quite know what you're going to get, because it's, it transcends all, or not all necessarily, but it transcends a lot of brands and publishers and franchises and IP. You don't know what's going to be there. So that's always a nice little treat and a little surprise. And yeah, again, it was just spread too thin. There were too many conferences that didn't have anything to show really, or had one thing and then lots of little bitty bits. So it would almost be nicer if we imagine a world where Sony hadn't decided to step away from E3, if there were only showcases from Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, and just all of the big publishers like Ubisoft and Bethesda had to choose who they wanted to kind of buddy up with to show some of their games, or they could scatter them scatter them throughout. It would give you a reason to watch all three, console conferences, and you'd maybe see all your Bethesda stuff alongside Xbox, maybe Ubisoft stuff scattered around, Square Enix stuff scattered a little bit. I think it just needs concentrating a bit more. That's not going to happen, but Summer Game Fest is probably the closest thing we're going to get to that.
Yeah, and I really hope Jeff continues to execute on his vision. But there we are. That's that discussion. Again, like I hate. Ben hates, and because I've absorbed all of his emotions and memories, I hate coming across as too negative or like a real Debbie Downer, a real party pooper. But I just wasn't convinced this year, and I know that I'm not alone. A lot of other outlets have said, "What was that? Did we need that?
Yeah,
was that really the return to form we wanted?" But for the rest of this podcast, we're going to be talking about the games. We're going to be talking about what you were excited for from E3, what we were excited for from E3 this year. But we got the chat out of the way about whether E3 is worth it. So thank you. Hopefully you found the discussion enlightening and you weren't just really irritated.
Yeah. So we're going to take a step backwards in the schedule now because of our wild question 1, question 2 back to back. We're going to talk about the games that we have barely had time for this week. Oh, it's called What We Playin.
It's What We Playin time. Time to talk about the games, what we've been playing. Brian, what have you been playing?
Given that Peter has gone away for a while, and not just from this job, but from his actual house, I've been continuing his hard mode run on Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. I'm not as good as he is though, so I'm kind of struggling with it. But that game, it's a lot of fun, but it's kind of by design a bit of not a grind, but it's a hack and slash game, so you are just going up against waves and waves of enemies, and it's difficult on the hardest setting. So alongside that, I was thinking, okay, well, there are a couple of games that I was looking forward to playing when E3 was done. I wanted to start Mass Effect Legendary Edition and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. However, I wasn't sure which one to play. I was like, on balance, maybe I'll go for Ratchet, because rather than commit to an entire trilogy. But then I was like, well, actually, I've always said for the past couple of years, I've wanted to try the PS4 Ratchet and Clank, the sort of movie tie-in one. And so I thought, well, it's part of the bundle that you get with PlayStation Now. I don't mean PlayStation Now, I mean PlayStation at the present time. So I thought, I'm going to quickly run through that before I start playing Rift Apart. So that's what I've been playing for the most part this week. I've been on Ratchet and Clank 2017, was it?
16.
16.
Yeah, came out just after the movie or just before.
Right, like yeah. And I'm really enjoying it. Yeah, it's really good. It looks great. It looks really good. And I've actually laughed out loud a couple of times. I think it's genuinely quite funny, some of the cutscenes. I guess they're ripped straight from the movie, right? I've not looked into it too much.
I think some of them are, yeah. Some of them are taken from the movie.
But, it's quite tropey, or kind of, it sort of parodies certain sci-fi tropes, or kind of takes the mick out of certain things. And, I'm honestly really enjoying it. And it's familiar enough, like I can see where it ties in with the original version of the game, but obviously they kind of, I think they called it a reimagining, didn't they, of the first game, rather than either a remake or a reboot or whatever. So it's familiar, but it feels fresh. And I keep thinking to myself, if I'm enjoying this game that was built for a PS4 in 2016, I know that I'm gonna really, really enjoy Rift Apart. Just purely from a technical standpoint, if nothing else, because this is already feeling, as I say, it looks very pretty, it plays well, it sounds good, so it can only go up from here, and I'm already enjoying it a lot. So yeah, that's been most of my game time this week outside of E3 evenings.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that you're enjoying it. I think it's had a patch as well to make it look and play even nicer on PS5.
Has it? Well,
so yeah. It's a
go.
pretty game anyway, but there we are.
Yeah. So what have you been playing, Dick?
Well, I've been playing Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Or just Rift Apart, sorry. And it is delightful. I'm having a lovely time with it. And I say having, I mean I had a lovely time with it because I finished it and I got the Platinum Trophy last night.
Wonderful.
And it's been widely stated that it's on the shorter side when compared to other Ratchet & Clank games. But like I thought it was the perfect duration. I thought the collectibles weren't too... sort of intimidating in terms of the amount of them and the difficulty of finding them. I felt like it was the perfect package, so to speak, in terms of respecting my time, but also providing a great experience and really enjoying it. And this is the second game in a row after Miles Morales that they've made that's on the sort of shorter side, not too imposing, really achievable collectibles, that kind of stuff. And given that Insomniac have just been firing on all cylinders recently, and you know they've released 2 PS5 games and a PS4 game as well with Miles in quick succession, perhaps this is intentional and there's sustainability to this model of a sort of less is more approach. You know, making games that aren't 30 hours, making games that are sort of 8 to 12 hour experiences with more if you want to do the collectibles, but there aren't too many collectibles. Like I'm all for this. If they can prevent burnout of their staff and also make games like this more regularly, then that sounds like a win-win. I don't always want a game that's you know, I'll be excited for Spider-Man 2, of course, and I would imagine that's probably the same sort of duration to the first Spider-Man game. But equally, I'd be more than happy if Spider-Man 2 was a shorter experience, if it meant that they could get Spider-Man 3 out faster, if it meant that they could get a new Ratchet & Clank out faster, if they could get a new Sunset Overdrive or Resistance game faster. All for it. I was so happy with this game. It was just really lovely. It's not, you know, going to blow your mind from a story perspective, but it is a beautiful game, like absolutely gorgeous and really fun to play. And yeah, I had a great time, a really, really lovely time with it. Apart from that, I very slowly reinstalled Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS4 so that I could go to the main menu and select upload save data to PS5 version, because that's fun. And then I installed it on PS5, got the free PS5 upgrade to the Intergrade version, downloaded my save, and I popped all the trophies for the Platinum because I already got it on PS4. And I do intend to play through the PS5 version again, and also the new DLC, but that's not on the agenda immediately. I just wanted to see if the trophies worked properly, and they did. So, hooray, I suppose. A well-earned Platinum trophy there.
Fantastic.
The last thing I played is the Stranger of Paradise demo, the Final Fantasy Origins game that was announced at E3. Got a PS5 demo. This seems to be splitting the crowd a little bit. A lot of people thinking it shows promise. A lot of people thinking it's the best game ever. And a lot of people just mercilessly mocking it and thinking it looks like a sort of PS2, PS3 era game. I am sorry to report that I fall not in the mocking category, but somewhere in between that and the it shows promise category. I didn't like it at all. I wasn't a fan. It's from the same devs as Neo, I believe. So it's sort of Final Fantasy Souls-like combat, and for some people that's a match made in heaven, but I was just so put off by it. I really didn't like it, and I would like to give it another go, because it was after, I think, a really long day of E3 coverage, and it was possibly the worst imaginable time to start learning controls and combat systems for a demo. So I'd like to think I'll give it another go and maybe come away from it a bit more positively, but certainly my first impression was not good. I did not like it.
I mean, the trailer was a bit much for me. It was just very... We talked about how again, we're stepping into negative Nelson shoes here, but the characters were almost stock characters, cookie cutters. Even the big villain, I said at the time, I think, or Peter said, that it looked like Nightmare from Soul Calibur, because it looked not just like Nightmare from Soul Calibur, but like a whole load of villains from similar games where they're just big man in armor who speaks in a scary voice or whatever. So, yeah, even just from an actual sort of art direction point of view, I wasn't that impressed. But it's not really for me anyway. I've never played a Final Fantasy game, so it's not really fair for me to comment. But purely as a trailer, you know, even if it had a different title and it wasn't part of that franchise, I would have looked at that and thought, a bit weird. So.
Team Ninja have a habit of taking player feedback on board, and this happened with Neo and Neo 2, I believe, the sort of public demos or betas or whatever you want to call them. There's a survey at the end of this that you're asked to fill out.
All right.
And so there's a very good chance that this will change quite considerably between now and release. And I really hope that it's obviously the best possible game. I would never root for a game to fail ever, and I think that's a lot of the issue with criticizing things on the internet is that I think a lot of people immediately assume that you're a hater and you just want it to fail. But for me personally, I didn't really like it at all. And I sincerely hope that it evolves into something that as many people can love as possible. Maybe even me.
Well, it's due next year, so they've got time.
Yeah, they do have time, for sure. But we will see how that one goes. But that is everything that I've been playing. Brian, it is time for a strange section. That's it. We're jumping straight from section to section now.
Yeah.
It's called...
hang on. Where's my... Oh, someone tidied up in here. Hang on. You'd think I, of all people, would have some... Hang on, got it right here.
Yeah, you got it. It's time for Weird News.
Weird News.
It's Weird News time. Time for some weird gaming news. Brian, what have you got?
This just in. According to Kotaku.com, it's written by Zach Zvizen, who says... Ancient 90s code from Quake still controls lights in Half-Life Alyx. Okay.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
So here we go. Reddit user Crazy Giaki noticed something interesting about the flickering lights in Half-Life Alyx. When compared next to flickering lights in the original Half-Life game, the two seem to sync up. And I'll send you the link right now, actually, for this, because there's a GIF on there of some side-by-sides of lights flickering in games of various, the past few years, past couple of decades.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Same tempo.
They flicker in exactly the same way. So, when compared next to flickering lights in the original Half-Life game, the two seemed to sync up. It seemed like Valve was still using the same bit of code to control these lights 22 years later, and that's exactly what's going on. Modern video games are often built on top of old code and data because games are hard to make, and sometimes, if it ain't broke, they don't fix it. So it's not surprising that Valve is still... Well, yeah, it's kind of surprising, but anyway, it's not super surprising that Valve is still using code from 1998's Half-Life to control the flickering lights in 2020's Half-Life Alyx. What's actually surprising, though, is just how old this code is. Another Reddit user, Lasermaniac, provided a detailed explanation of what's going on with these flickering lights, explaining that lighting in Valve games hasn't changed much over the last 2 decades. This is a quote now. From what I can see, the effect is handled by assigning a string of letters that indicates the sequence of brightness changes, with A being fully dark and Z being fully bright. The fluorescent flicker effect is defined by the string MMA, MA, MMMMA, MMAMAMAMAMAMAMMA, with M being the default brightness setting without any changes, and A being pitch black. So as it goes between those letters, it flickers in and out. You can get the idea.
So someone just coded these lights 20 odd years ago, longer now, and they're like, right, that code's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it.
And they're still using it. But the point of the article is that it's doesn't just go back to Half-Life. What's wild, it says, is this flickering pattern can be found not only in Valve titles, but in Quake. That's because Half-Life was built off a heavily modded version of the original Quake engine. So it's very likely that long random string of M's and A's that controls when a light should flicker, was written over 20 years ago by John Carmack himself. And because Valve's original Half-Life 1 engine, Gold Source, and later Source contained bits of old Quake code, still, these flickering lights sync up perfectly. It kind of blows my mind to think that a single string of letters defined lighting effects in my favourite games for almost 25 years now, said Lasermaniac on Reddit. And I have to agree with them, says the writer. It's a strange little thing that I never noticed before, but now I'll be staring at the flickering lights whenever I play games like Portal 2 or Half-Life, wondering how many more games there'll be around to greet me in.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? How
it
weird.
Is. Yeah.
So that's just how complicated games are to make. Sometimes you get legacy code like light flickers. Sometimes you get legacy code like NPCs in Bethesda RPGs phasing through walls.
Still doing it. They're still doing it just like the old days. Yeah.
I'm so excited to see gameplay for Starfield, not only to get an idea of how that game looks, but just I want to see what the Creation Engine 2 really is. Like, what is it, though? Is it just the same but shinier? Are we are they going to go through the walls but in 4K now?
Yeah.
I'm really intrigued.
Have they now got, like, over 2,000 lines of dialogue each, but it's still, yes, be seeing you. That was the best bit in Oblivion, is they sometimes end a conversation with cough.mp3.
Yeah.
That was a big highlight for me. We'll get to Starfield at the next question. Sorry, what were you saying?
I was just going to say, wait, I can do that again.
Yeah, yeah.
That's another good one. Another flub that was kept
brilliant.
in. Yes, we will get to Starfield very shortly. My weird news comes courtesy of PC Gamer and Wes Fenlon. Facebook to start testing ads in Oculus games.
Oh boy, great.
The first in-game ads will start appearing on the Oculus Quest 2 in the coming weeks. Facebook is planning to begin sticking ads in Oculus Quest games and apps within a few weeks using data pulled from users' Facebook profiles. Facebook detailed its plans in a blog post saying that in-headset ads are a key part of ensuring we're creating a self-sustaining platform, as if Facebook needed to make more money and, not just sell games. This inevitable step comes less than a year after Facebook began forcing new Oculus headset owners to use a Facebook account. And, of course, the ads will be able to pull on information from your Facebook profile, a spokesperson confirmed to The Verge. That personalized data includes a lot of what you're doing on the Oculus, like what apps you've viewed and installed, and even what other ads you've clicked on. It won't include more sensitive material like your private conversations or any weight, height, or gender information that you choose to provide to Oculus Move, it says. We'll see if it just breaks that promise.
Yeah.
Presumably, any age or gender information on your Facebook profile is fair game for targeted advertising, though. Developers will be able to... it's auto-playing videos with sound. Developers will be able to earn money from in-game ads, with Facebook keeping a portion of the revenue. According to The Verge, Facebook says it hasn't decided whether ads will eventually make their way to the Oculus Home Hub, which seems likely once their ad tech becomes more advanced. This test is for flat ads that would look at home on any website, but Facebook says it's also exploring new ad formats that are unique to VR. Brilliant.
I mean, in a way, that's even more boring that they're just going to be regular flat ads. Like, if nothing else, it would be a novelty to have a 3D ad thrust in your face. I'd be like, oh, okay. I mean, I'd get sick of it after about a day, I'm sure. But at least that first time, I'd be like, oh, wow, 3D VR ad. Okay.
Oh, cool. That's trying to sell me something that I talked to my mother about on Facebook. Brilliant. The first ads will appear in a game called Blaston, or Blaston, with more apps to follow. Bizarrely, the Oculus blog demonstrating these early in-app ads showed that you'll have the option to click on an ad and save the link for later, something I definitely find myself wanting to do with advertisements all the time. There will be a drop-down menu to report individual ads or hide them, but Facebook doesn't mention an option to disable ads altogether. You know that they will offer that. You know that they will, as like a premium service after you've spent God knows how much on an Oculus Quest 2. And you've had to sign up to Facebook. And you have to have a PC rig that can... Yeah, I mean, that's just... For God's sake, right?
It's ridiculous.
Really?
Yeah, that's
Come
awful.
on. It should be a platform to sell and play games. That should be it. That's your money-making opportunity.
Yeah, that's like going into Sainsbury's and Sainsbury's saying... Hey, in order to keep a sustainable business model in our shop, what we're also going to do while you're going around buying our products is say, hey, buy burgers. But I mean, I guess they do that a tiny bit, but not to the extent. That's maybe a bad example, but
it's like your trolley having a pop-up before you can put something
that's
in
what it's
there.
like. It's not like just a label being on the shelf saying, "Hey, this is good."
I'm trying to give you money. I've already given you money. What do you want?
Yeah, madness.
Please watch this 30-second ad before you can return your trolley, or before you can start using your trolley.
Please watch this 30-second ad before you can remove your Oculus headset.
Oh,
and it just sort of locks under your chin.
Clamp. You just hear it click, click, click. Honestly, if Mark Zuckerberg could do it, he would.
If he was allowed, he would absolutely do it.
Dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. So I'm really sorry to Oculus Quest users for that. Believe me, if I didn't have to be on Facebook, I would get rid of it. And I would have gotten rid of it a long time ago. Absolute cancerous website. Horrible.
Yeah.
Feel free to add Dick Mychinko on Facebook, facebook.com/Dick Mychinko. It's not real. It's not actually that.
Jeez.
But can you imagine? That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. We've got question 3, which is you, Brian.
Yes, it is. It's from Ian Rogers. Thank you, Ian Rogers, for your question. Hi, boys. Hope you're doing well. As PlayStation... Will we ever wake up again after E3? It may never happen. Hi, boys. Hope you're doing well. As PlayStation console fans, did the Xbox conference do enough to convince you that you need to pick up an Xbox either this year or next year? I decided to stick with PlayStation for this console generation, but if Starfield ends up being a hit, then getting an Xbox will be inevitable for me. Thank you, Ian. I've got a few sort of points to hit for this question.
Okay.
The first is something I've already said before, which is I think it's a mercy that Xbox bought Bethesda and not Nintendo or PlayStation bought Bethesda, because even if you don't have the console in question, it's also going to be available on PC. Whereas, if Sony or Nintendo had somehow purchased Bethesda with money that they don't have, or that not as much as Microsoft,
all exclusive,
then it would just be console exclusive. So I'm okay in that I'll be able to play on PC if I want to. I might do that. The other thing I wanted to say, which I touched on a bit earlier in the podcast, was that Starfield as a concept interests me because I like Elder Scrolls and to a lesser extent Fallout RPGs, but they're all good. And presumably Starfield is going to be that similar kind of model. So in that sense, it does interest me. However, the reveal at E3 didn't really tickle my fancy that much because it wasn't gameplay, and I already knew this game existed and vaguely what it was going to be about or what it was going to be like. So a little sort of taster like that hasn't changed my opinion on it at all. However, all that aside, if it wasn't available on PC and if they'd shown off some gameplay, it may well have made me think I will get an Xbox. But to be honest, I'm already thinking that. I've been thinking that for about 6 months, which, well, I guess that takes us back to pretty much when it was revealed or not long after that. But yeah, I've been thinking since particularly given that they've got 2 models, and the Series S is affordable. I've never been too hung up on frame rates and like 4K and stuff.
You don't have a 4K TV yet, right?
I don't have a 4K TV. We are actually buying a new TV soon, and it may well be 4K.
That's exciting.
But even then, it doesn't really bother me that much, especially as it would be a sort of a side console. I'd still be maining, as they say, on PlayStation. So I guess the only other downside is for some reason it's got less storage space, despite the fact that it's a digital-only console, which is kind of a bit frustrating. However, I probably only need 1 or 2 games installed at any one time on any given console. So for me, even ignoring Starfield, I am tempted to get a Series S at some point because Game Pass is such a good deal. So in answer to the question, in some ways, no, the Xbox conference didn't do enough to convince me that I need to get an Xbox because I'd kind of already decided that I would do. But if I hadn't decided that already, Starfield, for example, the way it was presented didn't really pull me in because there wasn't much there revealed, and it's also going to be available on PC. So Game Pass really is the thing that convinces me, and that wasn't I guess E3 just showed that even more stuff is coming to Game Pass. So in that sense, yeah, sure, I suppose it did.
Yeah, the Xbox and Bethesda conference was largely look how amazing Game Pass is and will continue to be. And yeah, like I'm a PlayStation fan. I've always been, if you want, Team PlayStation. Like it's like support for me. It's like supporting a sports team. Like I like to see PlayStation do well. I know they're a corporation who couldn't give a flying flip about me as a person. But like I've always enjoyed their games and I like the ecosystem and I've been there for a long time. And that's not going to change. They will always hold a special place in my heart, and I will keep buying their exclusives because I believe in their quality, and I'd like to, continue to play the franchises that I've played and started playing over the years. But yeah, much like you, Peter, we've long said, and on this podcast as well, that the Series S is a very tempting console to get. Not necessarily the X, but certainly the S. From a financial perspective. And when Microsoft bought Bethesda, that was a game changer. And we're still not completely sure what is going to be exclusive and what isn't. We do know a couple of things that are definitely going to be exclusive now. Starfield and is it Redfall, I believe?
Yeah.
But we're still, we're still not 100% on some other things like the Elder Scrolls 6 and stuff. I still hold out hope that those games will be multi-platform, because I do think that it somewhat flies in the face of what they said when the purchase was made about this is not about taking games away from people, which is what they've done, especially with the Outer Worlds 2, which I'm a bit sore about. And I know that the Outer Worlds 2 was not part of the Bethesda acquisition, so that's a separate thing. However, the Outer Worlds 1 was one of my games of the year in 2019. And yeah, I'm a little annoyed that I potentially have to buy a new console to play the sequel, but I enjoy the Outer Worlds 2 and the Outer Worlds 1 enough that I would buy another console to play it. And if Game Pass continues to be as lucrative and as sort of the best deal in gaming as it is currently, then that only sweetens the pot. I very briefly was subscribed to Game Pass Ultimate just so I could play Ark with James Jenkins on that joint stream like a couple of months ago or whenever it was. And in my brief time being subscribed, because I'm not a PC gamer and it wouldn't have like behooved me to stay subscribed. It would have been a waste of money. I wouldn't have played any games on it. But I was so impressed with what I saw. It is a truly fantastic platform, and Xbox stepping its game up like this, even if it is just, we have trillions of dollars, so we're going to buy this thing, even if it is just sort of that element. Them stepping their game up like this and stepping to Sony, who are undeniably the market leader. The PS5 is just running rings around the Xbox Series at the moment, but it's not always going to be like that if Xbox keep going the way they're going, and that is going to have to force Sony's hand to step their game up as well. It's going to be better for everyone. Again, I'm not thrilled about the fact that I potentially have to buy a new console, just from a financial perspective as much as anything else. Not a fanboy perspective, which is a stupid term, but from a financial perspective, the fact that I potentially have to buy a new console to play the next game in a series I've already played elsewhere, it stings. Like, it is annoying. But I am tempted to do it. And I think not right now, but when these games start releasing at a rapid fire rate, which they are going to do from Xbox, then it may be the time to hop in. And I will do so gladly.
Yeah, certainly. I would still, if Elder Scrolls, for example, is available on console, on PlayStation, I would still rather play it sitting on a couch with a controller in my hand rather than at my desk. I've always been more comfortable, like literally physically, not just emotionally. I've been more physically comfortable playing games on a sofa with a TV. So if that's an option, that will be what I'm going for. But I'm still just, I think it's a mercy that, almost everything that Bethesda release on an Xbox exclusively within the console market will probably also be available on PC. So I won't ever have to buy an Xbox Series S if I decide I don't want to. But that Game Pass, man, it's very good, isn't it? It's very the value for money as well. Like they could charge way more for that, and I would still be tempted. So, and the back catalog alone as well, the backwards compatibility, and I've played Halo on Steam on various live streams over the past year or two, but again, to sit down on a sofa with a controller in hand and play some Halo multiplayer, that'd take me right back to, God knows when, I don't know, but yeah, that's something that I'm looking forward to doing one day.
Yeah, so the answer to that question for me is not now, but very possibly soon.
Yeah, same.
When these games starts coming out, but there we are. Brian, it's time to move on to something rather large. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's the big discussion.
The big discussion.
Big discussion time. This time the big discussion comes from Hannah Cutts, who says... Kurtz. Obvious question is obvious. Which game announcements... I didn't put that in. She put that. Which game announcements were you personally the most excited for? And were there any games/franchises you were hoping would get reveals, but ended up not? So we put out a poll and a post on our Patreon where our listeners and our Patreon supporters, of course, could submit their favourite game of the show and also vote in a poll as to who put on the best conference at E3 2021. We will get to those in a second, but before we do, Peter...
Yeah.
No, Brian. Before we do, Brian...
Yeah.
Was there a game announcement that you were sort of hoping for that you didn't get?
I don't know if there were any announcements. I suppose I didn't think this was going to happen, but I was sort of hoping there would either be a Spyro or Crash game announced somewhere, probably at Summer Game Fest. That's typically where the Crash games have been either revealed initially or they've had subsequent trailers and stuff. And there's been bits of like rumors this year that Spyro 4 might be on the way, or that there's maybe some other kind of Crash spin-off possibly happening, but there's also all that stuff going on with Vicarious and Call of Duty and Toys for Bob, and it's a bit of a mess, and the rumor mill has been it's been a bit chaotic. So I was hoping for something like that, but it didn't happen. But in terms of not reveals necessarily, it would have been nice to have updates on Hogwarts Legacy, on maybe the Star Wars, Lego Star Wars, which got delayed as well. That would have been nice. And of course, the obligatory elephant in the room, Beyond Good and Evil 2, would have been nice to see something about that. But I don't know if I necessarily expected it. But was there anything that you were hoping would be revealed, announced, updated?
Yeah, I suppose this was quite difficult to think about, really, because there wasn't... I don't know that there was anything anything announced currently that I'm desperate to see more of necessarily. Right, yeah. Perhaps some more Gotham Knights, perhaps some more Suicide Squad versus the Justice League would have been interesting to see. Yeah. A bit more from Warner Brothers, especially. I know you would have liked to have seen the Harry Potter game as well, but it was just back full blood from them this year, really. The one that I've written down, though, is I would have been interested to see potentially Quantic Dream's new game, because it's been a couple of years now since Detroit. You've got to imagine that they're hard at work on their next title. I know that studio, especially its leadership, is embroiled in some hot water currently, and sort of the public face, David Quage, isn't exactly smelling like roses. And I don't know what the situation is in that he could, maybe he could be ousted from his position, at which point a David-less Quantic Dreams, what does that look like? How does that work?
They might have to take on Tommy Wiseau or something.
Yes, someone equally bonkers, but hopefully less awful. And but I would be, as a fan of their games, I would have loved to have seen something new from them. They're no longer partnered with PlayStation in an exclusive capacity, so I think their next title is sort of free to go wherever it wants. So it could have been here, but never mind. Maybe at some point soon.
Yeah.
In terms of who won E3, Brian, would you like to know what the listeners voted?
I'd love to know what the listeners voted.
So, in fact, why don't you guess who won?
Are we talking game or conference?
We're talking conference.
Conference. I think probably just based purely... Well, actually, no. I think listener votes... I don't agree with this necessarily, but I've seen quite a lot of rhetoric and discussion online that Nintendo as a conference won E3. Okay. It's not necessarily what I would vote. Just on a personal level, I would say that it was just all about Guardians for me. But yeah, I'm going to say that they said Nintendo.
It was not Nintendo. It was Xbox and Bethesda Showcase with 37%. Then it was Nintendo Direct with 30%. Then Summer Game Fest with 14%. Square Enix with 8%. And I can't tell if it's a joke or not, but Bandai Namco with 3%. They also tied with Ubisoft Devolver for that position. But yeah, Bandai Namco was terrible.
Yeah,
it wasn't even a conference in the end, I don't think.
Yeah,
it was showed off Dark Pictures Anthology for like 10 minutes.
I'm surprised though that it wouldn't be Nintendo at the top. Yeah. Some people seemed that they were thoroughly impressed by that. Online.
Yeah, well, I think Nintendo had a really strong showing, and I imagine Nintendo fans were very impressed. But if you're outside of Nintendo's ecosystem, there's a good chance that there was practically nothing there for you, whereas Xbox and Bethesda showed far more third-party titles. I'm surprised, honestly, that Summer Game Fest didn't do better. I thought there was quite a lot there.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I say, Nintendo wasn't for me, but I thought maybe they've always had a big following. They're Nintendos.
Those darned Nintendos.
Haven't they? Yeah.
Doing what they're doing. So let's run down, Peter. The listener voted. It should be top 5, but there were a few tied positions. So it's technically the top 4 with a few occupying the same spaces. And I believe among them are our, personal favourite games. So we'll just get to those as we go through.
Yeah, for sure. So tied at number 4, I guess we'll go through them each. But we'll just say for now that tied is Stalker 2, Outer Worlds 2, and Far Cry 6. So, I mean, are you excited for Stalker 2? Because I know you're a Metro fan, and they're certainly cut from the same cloth. It looks certainly more intense as a game, a bit more serious despite the setting. But is it something for you, do you think?
I am tempted to give it a go. I think it's the kind of game where I would probably wait for reviews and coverage to come out before I hop straight into it, because I played Metro Exodus, the most recent Metro game, and I really didn't like it. But then lots of other people loved it, and I'm wondering if maybe it's just maybe I don't like that sort of setting as much as I thought I did. Although it was purely from a gameplay and story perspective that I didn't like Metro Exodus as much as Last Light. But Stalker 2 looks fantastic.
Yeah,
it looks really good, and I believe it's coming to platforms that I can play it on. So hopefully it'll be really good. I'm honestly not sure. I think I'll wait. I'll wait to hear more about it before I dive in.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't play a lot of FPS at all anymore. Hardly anything. I can't really think the last time I did play an FPS. I played a little bit of Battlefront. Well, I say a little bit. I played Battlefront 2, but that was more just because it's a Star Wars game, and you can play that third person. So yeah, I mean, actually, all of these tied at the bottom, I'm probably not super likely to play because of the shooty nature of them. But Outer Worlds 2, I know that was a disappointment for you because of the exclusivity. But what's your plan there? Do you think?
Yeah,
you think that's going to be the reason to get an Xbox, or are you going to try and force your way onto a computer that might run it?
No, I'm absolutely I object to playing games on PC completely. I find, like you, I'm just not comfortable with it. But emotionally, I just find PC gaming to be too complex for my monkey brain, and for me, playing games is sat on a sofa with a controller. That is how I want to play my games. So. No, I won't get a PC for it. I've got my work PC, obviously, but presumably by the time that releases, this work PC will be back at work, so I won't have it at home.
True.
Outer Worlds 2, a bit sad. I can't play it on PlayStation. Especially if there's some sort of... Imagine if there's like a carrying over your save element. That would really sting. But... I love the first one. Really looking forward to this next one. And even though we know literally nothing about it apart from the fact that it had a great CG trailer, I am very intrigued to see more from Obsidian's weird space world that they've crafted.
Yeah. Far Cry 6 was the next one. We saw that several times at E3, didn't we?
We did. With three, I think. Three
times, I think, in the end.
What do you make of Far Cry 6 after seeing so much from so many angles, I should say?
It's very Far Cry still, isn't it? Like, you can see a Far Cry. You made the point that it looked good. The gameplay that we saw looked very pretty, but it didn't have any HUD on. And, if you try and imagine a bit of HUD over the top of it, it's like, oh yeah, here we are back in Far Cry. There's a lot to be said for the way that Far Cry write their villains, and clearly this time, it's no exception. And then on top of that, you've got the DLC with the villain, the playable villain stuff as well. I can't remember what that was actually called.
I know what you mean there.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to go at with that, and maybe by that time, I will have a bit of an opening on my PS5 library, and that might be the sort of game that will pull me in, because I do appreciate what Far Cry does as a series. And I tend to look at each Far Cry on its own merits, like in terms of the setting and, sort of the way that it's advertised. I don't have an overarching view of whether I do or don't play Far Cry games. So, it's one that I'm going to continue to watch. And, I'm looking forward to seeing more gameplay, I think, because at the moment we've only seen that little snippet, really.
Yeah.
Is this an instant yes for you? You're going to give it a go, or are you?
No, it's not. It's certainly not. It'll undoubtedly be of high quality, and the story will be great. Giancarlo Esposito, I'm certain, will be a very compelling villain.
Yeah,
but purely because I have yet to see anything that assuades my concerns that it is more Far Cry, and I am also very tired of Far Cry, and because they're kind of the same, and that's fine if you want that. I don't necessarily want that. I've got sort of series fatigue with that one. But like I said on the live reactions, or the what happened at, whichever one it was, from Ubisoft, this may well be, if it is really good, this may well be my time to hop back in, as I did with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I've had a few years away from the franchise. I fell off it after 4, because that was just so similar to 3 for me, gameplay-wise. I was like, I'm just doing the same stuff. But yeah, it's one to watch for me.
That's why I'm open-minded about it, because I have had that rest from Far Cry, and so maybe it is a time for me to hop back in. It's still going to be an Ubi world, isn't it? It's just going to be, you can imagine the number of map markers and stuff. So I don't question that it's going to be another Far Cry game. But you're right, like in exactly the same way with Valhalla, having had a rest, I'm willing to not commit now to giving this one a go, but to keep an eye on it and not just immediately write it off as, oh, it's another Far Cry, I'm sick of those. Because, I've had enough of a rest that I could feasibly give this one a try.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to note as well that they recently, I think in the past year, we talked about it on the podcast, Ubisoft supposedly replaced their, for want of a better term, tastemakers at Ubisoft, which is part of the reason why so many of these games were so similar, or at least that's what was alluded to in the press, is that they had this sort of team that went around all their studios and made sure that all of their games were kind of uniform. And apparently they got rid of these guys and they brought in new people. So I'm hoping that soon we're going to start to see some genuinely innovative and new takes on these existing franchises. Not like, let's make Far Cry 6 a MOBA or anything like that.
No,
it just means shaking up the formula a bit, rather than just adding a couple of new features, or, we're really into bows and arrows this year, or whatever. I'm really hoping for something really fundamentally quite different, and hopefully that will continue to... I imagine Far Cry 6 has been in development for quite some time, but hopefully with future iterations of these series, we'll see some real change in here. That's my hope anyway.
Bit of divergence would be nice, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In third place, Brian, We have Metroid... Let me try and say that without falling over myself. Metroid Dread.
Yeah.
What did you think of Metroid Dread?
It looks nice. I like the fact that, some of these genres or... I don't know if genre is the right word, but play styles, I suppose, have been carried forward from literally a couple of decades ago at this point. And yeah, it's still your classic Metroid or Metroidvania style where you're jumping around in a side-scrolling world, which I'm sure requires exploration and backtracking and so on. But, at this point, we're looking at effectively a 3D presentation, even though you're still side-scrolling. It's, it looks the same as it always has, but in an updated way. And I think, hats off to Metroid as a series for being able to just stick at it for this long and still have clearly such a dedicated fan base. I've not played a Metroid game in a long time. So, again, this is probably not one that I'm going to rush out and snap up. But, yeah, it's just nice to see a game of old, I should say a series of old, to still be doing well, thriving today, moisturized, etc. And looking kind of fresh but familiar.
Yeah, it is nice. I'm really happy for fans of Metroid. I know they've been starving for new Metroid stuff for a long time. And Metroid didn't have the best showing on Wii U, and I'm not entirely certain that there's been anything on Switch since then, apart from the much-promised Metroid Prime 4, which was then they restarted development after that wasn't going too well, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. So this is coming. It is happening. It harkens back to the original sort of Metroid design. It's exciting. It's exciting, and I'm really happy for people that they get to play this. Not for me, though.
No. Something that might well be for you in terms of familiar design is number 2, or one of the 2 number 2s, Elden Ring. It finally got shown off properly in a kind of gameplay in-engine sense.
It did, and it looks like open world Dark Souls, and that is quite frankly, that's enough for me. It's confirmed now that it will have online multiplayer as well, co-op and so on, which was something I think that was sorely missing for me personally from Sekiro, which is why I couldn't really get into it. Because I find those, especially going through them for the first time, I find them far more engaging to experience with another person who's never played it either, and you're both sort of creeping through, trying to work out what's lurking around the corner.
Yeah.
I'm wondering whether or not I should sort of just do a media blackout on this game.
Right.
I'm not sure I really want to know anything else. I feel like I know the subtitle or the subtext even of this game, and that's sort of it. Open world Dark Souls, that's sort of all I need to know. And anything more than that feels unnecessary. And if they're able to stick to this release date of the beginning of next year, it's going to be here before we know it, and I'm very excited to play Elden Ring.
Yeah, I mean, these games are always going to split the crowd to a certain extent for people who aren't into the Soulsborne formula and that kind of difficulty level. But say what you like about that aspect of it, I still think that just the design of these, the visual design of these games, the presentation, the art direction, the bosses, the monsters are just an absolute spectacle to behold every single time. I thoroughly enjoy checking out these games just, on YouTube and just images online and stuff, even if I'm not so into playing them because of the punishing difficulty. I always have to just applaud the horrific entities that are created every single time. So that alone for me was a bit of a spectacle, something to enjoy from the trailer. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of this game. Whether or not I ever get my hands on it, I don't know. Looks good. Looks great.
Yep. Miyazaki is increasingly just up there as one of those developers where it's like I need to pay attention to what they are doing. Your Ken Levines, your Kojimas.
Yeah.
Just sort of, they're working on this. Okay, now I'm interested. Now this is one to pay. They've just got such a strong track record that you want to pay attention to any game they're involved in. So we'll see how it turns out next year. Very soon.
Yeah. Very good. The other joint second place, though, was, drum roll please, no, I don't, thank you. Breath of the Wild 2, as we'll call it for now.
Yes.
I'm sure it's awaiting a subtitle, but it was shown off properly, and it sort of... I think it looks quite familiar in some ways. Like, I was almost surprised by how similar to the first one it looked in terms of design and so on. Of course, it being a kind of direct sequel, that makes sense. But equally, I guess I'm so used to Zelda games being quite different from one to the next. So I was like, oh, this really, really is, just like the last one, only with probably higher visual fidelity. But, why change? Why fix it if it ain't broke is not how the phrase goes. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, again, I'm very pleased for those who were hoping to actually see this in action. And it looks very pretty to be up in the sky as well on those floating islands and stuff. So another game I'm looking forward to seeing more of as we get closer to its release.
Yeah, extremely striking. And people have been waiting so long for news about this. And I'm very curious to discover how much familiar ground that they'll tread here, because yes, you can go up in the sky and on the clouds now, which is awesome. That's going to really lead to some interesting gameplay opportunities, I think, especially with all the powers that you've got and the new ones seemingly where you can phase through the floor and stuff. I'm wondering though, when you're back down on terra firma, if it's just going to be sort of an identical map. And I don't want to be dismissive and just say just the identical map, just one of the best open worlds ever made.
Yeah,
that's not what I mean. I'm just curious as to whether there'll have been some sort of further calamitous disaster, and perhaps the map has been changed slightly. Maybe you can't get to areas you used to be able to get to. Maybe there's new areas. I'll be very curious to see, because that was, and this is not a fair comparison, that was my issue with the South Park, The Fractured Butthole, is that they just reused the same map. Like, it was identical, but they just said, oh no, you can't go this way because there's some Lego bricks on the floor and that's lava in our game that we're playing. And they couldn't, for example, do a third South Park game set in exactly the same map, which would be difficult because everything takes place in that city. So this is the problem with sequels set in the same open world.
It's exactly the same issue faced by the Spider-Man games, not just Miles Morales, but when Marvel's Spider-Man 2 comes out, it will presumably be set in New York once again. But at least with Miles Morales, it was clever to set it in the winter, because at least visually, I think it did to some extent feel a bit different.
Exactly.
I think by the time you played that game for a while and you'd swung through Central Park many times, you kind of started to think, oh yeah, it's basically just the same setting as last time. But you do have to come up with innovative ways to mix these things up, really.
And I'm sure they will. This was obviously by far and away the most successful game from an awards perspective in 2017 is when that launched. Yeah, I believe so. The first one, anyway.
I think so.
And this one is hugely anticipated. I want to give the first one another go because I borrowed it briefly from Mikey Johnson.
Right.
And I don't feel like I gave it a fair shake. I feel like I hopped in, was massively overwhelmed by how sort of go anywhere, do anything, the approach was of the game design. And I was like, I want a little bit of direction. Can you just sort of prod me in the right direction? And then I kept falling off stuff, and my stick sword kept breaking, and I was like, I can't be asked for this right now. And then I gave it back to him. But I know how good this game is, and I really do want to get into it, especially if the sequel is anywhere near as good as the original one.
Yeah. Our number one, I'm sure the same can be said for you, Ben, Dick, is my number one game of the show, and was the reason why I thought Square Enix might win the conference of the show, despite being a bit weird for the rest of it after this game was shown off. It is, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Is it Guardians of the Galaxy Save the Universe? It's got a subtitle, but no one seems to be using it, which is fine, because you say Guardians of the Galaxy and everyone knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And this won by quite a considerable margin, I will say. It got twice the votes of the games in second place.
Yeah.
And I can sort of see why. Like, the gameplay, mechanically, like, it didn't look too crazy. Like, it didn't look bad. But there was nothing about it that was like, whoa, that looks flipping brilliant. But it's just the fact that it's Guardians, the fact that they've managed to subvert the you've captured their stunt doubles issue that Marvel's Avengers had, which, you know, may not be the case for everyone, but certainly it seems to be the case for us, having spoken about it. And the fact that the writing is so good, like, it feels so true to form. And by virtue of that alone, even if the gameplay is like a bit average, I think that the rest of the experience will probably carry it for me. Like, this was such a pleasant surprise. And honestly, without this being here, it would have literally just been Elden Ring, really, out of this whole E3 for me. And perhaps, you know, again, putting the games to one side, if I brought the games into the room when discussing the quality of E3 as a whole this year, for me personally, it would have been, God, what a waste. But with Guardians, wow, a game seemingly tailor-made for Dick Mychinko. Who'd have thought?
Well, I was thinking that as we were going through that sort of top 5, there were 7 games there voted in the end because of the ties, but pretty much everyone we went through, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to play that, to be honest. Oh, yeah, I don't think I'll play that one. Might try that one, possibly, don't know. And then finally we get to Guardians, and yes, I will be playing this game. Thoroughly looking forward to it. But I'm completely in agreement. I think Elden Ring, I can appreciate its merits, but unfortunately for me, I'm just not really a Soulsborne kind of player. So that's just another game I'm not going to be playing. But Guardians, outside of the Elden Ring, Guardians is one of the only big announcements that I thought actually got me excited in this E3. And again, as I said at the top of the podcast, on a very personal level, I'm pleased that Orcs Must Die is finally coming to Steam, but that's not exactly a headline announcement of E3. So, but we've already talked about that and the state of this E3. So, yeah, speaking about Guardians, I'm so pleased that it's a single-player, narrative-led game. I think it was a smart move that seemingly you're playing as Star-Lord for the vast majority of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if you occasionally step into the boots of other characters like they do in Resident Evil games, for example. But it seems like they've just sat down and thought, what do people actually want out of this? Not how can we make the most money, pointing no fingers, but it just seems like they've done it right. And I'm still reserving judgment, of course. This is all just going off what we saw at E3, and maybe when we get our hands on it, it might, not play very well, or there might be performance issues, or maybe they've literally just shown us the very best bits of the game and everything else is going to be rubbish. Unlikely. But based on what we've got now, I think this looks like a wonderful experience, kind of not too serious. I'd like to think it probably won't be super, super long either if it's this sort of focused single-player event. So it looks like it's exactly what we want. And apart from the fact that I'm not really a Marvel fan at all, it's also a game kind of tailor-made for Brian, in that it's a focused story like that. I'm leaning more and more towards linear single player games now. I see less appeal in open worlds than I once did. Yeah. So this is good news for me.
It's very much because I think open worlds became the hot button choice for developers for quite a while. Like, we've got all this new hardware. Let's make the games as big as possible. Go bigger. Make them even big. More to collect, more to do. And it's just there's an element of fatigue, but also because as you get older, you have less time for this stuff. If I was still in university, I'd be like, yes, give me more. Give me all the games, the biggest games, the longest games. I don't care. I'll play them all. I'll stay up until like 6 a.m. and then not go to lectures. It's not realistic to be able to play those games all the time. when you're when you're a real adult, so to speak. Not to say that university attendees don't have their own troubles they're going through. Oh Lord, do they? But certainly, having tight focused 15-hour-ish single player games, that's my niche. I like that.
Yeah.
Give me more of those, please. That's lovely. And I like dabbling with other stuff for variety, of course. And I love a good open world game, but I don't only want open world games.
No, exactly. Yeah, I still enjoy open world games as and when, but I didn't have my fingers crossed thinking, if someone said, oh yeah, there's a Guardians game coming out, it's not a live service game, it's got its own story and it's single player, would you like it to be open world, or would you like it to be a more kind of simple linear or linear-ish non-open world game? I would have gone with the latter. I really loved, for example, Last of Us Part 2. People love God of War. It shows that kind of thing can be just as successful and just as high quality as your Horizons, for example, and your Witchers.
Yeah, and there's an element of being able to straddle that as well. Super Mario Odyssey was sort of open world but linear at the same time. You had your different environments that you go to in sort of a linear fashion, and then you could hop back between them. But yeah, I really enjoyed Odyssey, and I think not everything needs to be huge all the time, and that's so nice to see that a game is getting center stage that isn't that, from a third party publisher, no less.
Yeah.
Usually you get your single player games normally from in the form of exclusives, but this is nice. I like this. Good to see. But of course, we want to hear from you. We already have from our patrons, but what about you watching/listening at home? What was your favorite game? What was your favorite conference? Do you think E3 as an event has a future, or would you rather have just not had 17 conferences, but only 3 of them were good? All over the course of a few days. Let us know. We want to hear from you. We're not always right, but this just our opinions. It's just
have you that's your opinion. And have you changed your mind or been further persuaded to buy an Xbox? If you don't have an Nintendo Xbox or
already,
PlayStation player,
it's becoming increasing. If it wasn't already, it's all but cemented my decision to get one at some point. But there we are. Brian's now going to tell you where you can find us on various platforms.
You can find us at Team TripleJump everywhere you look. YouTube and Twitch, that's youtube.com and twitch.tv/Team TripleJump. It's where all of our videos and streams go out. Remember, if you've got Amazon Prime, one of the benefits of that is a free or bundled Twitch sub. So you can sort of spend that on us at no extra cost to yourself. We benefit from it in the usual way, and so do you. It's all just as part of your usual payment plan. Yeah. So consider that. When we're streaming on YouTube and Twitch, we're modded by Lord Brotovich, Madstadactyl, and Trowling Badger. Thank you, mods. We've got social media at twitter.com and facebook.com/Team TripleJump. Luke Eldon is still doing fantastic things over on Facebook, but we've also now got community manager Fraser, who handles both Cultaholic and TripleJump in terms of community stuff. He did an excellent job, by the way, of live tweeting through E3. We'll get to that later. We've got some people to thank, but well done, Fraser. We've got a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Team TripleJump if you want to ask questions on this podcast and look at the other benefits as well. The website is triplej.mup. That's triplejU.mp. If you go to triplej.mup/Discord, that will send you straight to our Discord, which is modded by Jack, Joe, and Holloweyes. triplej.mup/podcast will send you to a place you can get the audio version if you're watching on YouTube right now. If you go to triplej.mup/VODs, that will redirect you to our VODs channel over on YouTube. And finally, triplejumpshop.com is where our shop is hosted. You can also follow at TripleJump Shop on Twitter for all the latest news. It's coming, we promise. The merch is coming. It's nearly there.
It is. We are having discussions. It is going down, but we'll let you know as soon as we know. what's going on.
We will. Yeah.
You can follow Brian Bumpus on Instagram and Twitter at @ThatPeterAustin, and myself just on Twitter at @confused_dude. We do lists every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Streams every Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Thursday being the joint streams, Blaze it on YouTube. Monday and Friday streams on Twitch.
Yeah.
Worst Games Ever is fortnightly, Friday for patrons of a certain tier, Sunday for everyone else. The podcast is every Saturday. We do shows once every other week or thereabouts. Why not leave a review on oh God, I'm so close to the end. Leave a review on iTunes or your platform of choice. It helps something to do with Al Gore's rhythms. TripleJump.gg, Brian. That's a good website.
It is. Do you use digital currency for things like PlayStation and Xbox? You know, like buy-in stuff. Do you use their mine coins?
Game Pass?
Game Pass, yeah. Head over to TripleJump.gg and you can basically just buy them from us. You're probably buying them anyway. Why not buy them from us and help us out? It
doesn't cost any more. It's just a regular amount. We're officially partnered. It's all above board, and you support us in the process. So do consider doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have finally reached officially the end of E3. It has happened. It's done. Lots of late nights, a whole load of coverage. Thank you to those of you who tweeted us and let us know that you appreciated the What Happened At videos we made being available on the podcast feed too. That was. I'm glad that you appreciate those and that you like those. Because we will endeavour to do more like that. We know that for some of you it's far more convenient to consume those in audio form. They will of course always be best enjoyed, I should say, on YouTube, because they will have the actual footage of the games, so you can see what we're talking about. Yeah. But sometimes it's easier to listen on the go, and so those went up on the podcast feed. All of the live stream reaction VODs went up on the VODs channel if you want to watch back for some reason. A lot of you have, which is nice. And then we've also got E3 lists, haven't we? And there was a big video that went out Friday.
Yeah, we did a kind of overarching what happened at E3. So that was, I believe, written by James Jenkins, who has been an absolute godsend throughout E3. Yeah. He edited together all of our kind of off-the-cuff what happened at. He has written, as I say, the overarching what happened at E3, which is a big scripted piece. He did some serious late nights, that boy, and he's got some well-deserved time off coming up now, I think. Yeah, he absolutely does. He was a hero. And on top of that, we want to thank Fraser, our community manager, who was live tweeting all of the conferences we were reacting to. Did a brilliant job, saw a huge amount of engagement on Twitter. Yeah. So we want to thank him for doing a fantastic job over there. Also got to thank Alex, in particular, for editing the What Happened at E3 video that went out on Friday, but also our other video editors as well for editing the various E3 lists that went out. Of course, our live stream mods who were there with us throughout the throughout proceedings, and just in general the rest of the team. Philip looking after the writers of those E3 lists, and so on. So everybody helped out, everybody pitched in. It was a team effort, and we really hope you enjoyed our E3 coverage, or at least found it informative, even if you hated it. So thank you for coming along and experiencing E3 with us. And well done to Ben Potter for doing a lot of he hosted all the streams. I mean, and he did. Hello. What? I hesitated there because I was like, I just said Ben Potter and I shouldn't have done. And I was like, oh no, I can say that because he did actually do that.
He is dead, but he did exist. Yeah. He existed at some point.
So I'll just pick up where I lost my train of thought there. He hosted all of the live streams, and he did a lot of prep beforehand, just sort of setting up some assets and things like that. So he did an excellent job there, that Ben Potter.
Oh, well done. That's very kind. I'm sure he would appreciate that if he was alive to hear it. You often can't say the things you want to say to loved ones until they're,
No, that's gone, true. So. You feel embarrassed. So
go say it to his grave, you coward.
This. Yeah.
Finally, actually a couple more things. Every Bond game ranked. We're doing it. This topped our poll. We did a poll on YouTube, didn't we? A few months ago. A lot of people wanted to see every James Bond game ranked from worst to best. That goes out tomorrow on Sunday.
Sunday, yeah. It's a really good one. I like how that's come out. Again, it's an Alex special in terms of the edit. He's been doing our ranked for a while now, really, solely.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's come out very nicely. It was a lot of fun. And again, of course, well done to Philip for writing that and researching it.
Philip the hero, who you will have heard on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. That Philip, that's the guy. Yeah. That's him. He wrote this. Finally, Peter, we're thrilled to announce that Kat, one of our freelance writers, is joining us full time on Monday. So we will have Kat, our first full-time writer. James Jenkins sort of fulfilled that role, but also in a video editor capacity when he first joined shortly after we started in 2019. But Kat is coming on as a dedicated writer. She's fantastic. You'll have seen a lot of her work on the channel, and we're so excited to have her join the team.
We are. Just for clarity's sake, she's not the new presenter. I'm sure she'd be great at that if she wanted to, but that's not what she's coming on as.
More news on that in due course. Yeah,
very soon, I'm sure. Wonderful. Well, that just about brings us to the end. There's just enough time, though, for today's sponsor.
Yes, the sponsor, Brian, is Elden Fling, a dating, it says here, a fating service, which sounds a bit ominous.
Oh, dear.
I typoed. I mean, the Elden Fling typoed when they sent over the ad read. Dating service for over 70s. Hey, come have an Elden Fling. Come and do it.
Do it. You'd love it.
Find love if you're over 70. If you're not, though, tough luck. And if you're 69, nice.
Find love for, on average, the last 10 years of your life before you die.
Oh, no.
On average,
you might
live to 120.
Yeah, 200 years old.
Oh, no, that would be worse.
Well, then you could find several more. You have to stop playing with Lego at 100.
Yeah, you do, don't you? Rubbish. 99, isn't it? Yeah, 100. Yeah.
Rubbish. Anyway, there we are. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. Again, we hope you found it informative. That's a wrap on E3, apart from one final list on Tuesday coming up. But until next week, when we return to normal, and hopefully our sleep schedules have returned to normal and we're not so flippin' knackered, I've been Dick Mychinko. He's been Brian Bumpis, and we will see you very soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.